Pledge to do my uttermost to make this happen, but cannot do it alone. I need your help to become president of Nigeria.
Just as you thought, this is a story about this man. His name is Buhari, one of the few persons who has affected and influenced your life and those around you significantly. This is someone you probably hate, arguably the worst president Nigeria has ever had, the most disliked person in Nigeria, even though we have people contesting for that position as of the moment. Everyone has their opinion about this man, good or bad, it doesn't really matter. I just want you to join me on this agonizing story as I tell you the story of how one man ruined millions. How one man effectively set a country back on track to a resounding failure. This is how one man effectively turned the country into a Nollywood horror movie. A low budget one. This is how Buhari made Nigeria fail.
Change is imperative if we are to avoid the impending national failure. Poor leadership.
First off, the story does not start in this attire. This attire is rather unusual for this man. This is better. This is Buhari as a major general. This is also few moments to when Buhari would lead one of the most significant coups in the history of Nigeria, overthrowing the first democratically elected president in Nigeria, Shehu Shagari. For the record, this guy's administration was actually terrible and corrupt. This was the year 1983. Although many interesting things had happened in Buhari's life before this year, I chose this year because we are more concerned with his leadership, not where he was born and how many wives he married. And so it begins. Buhari becomes head of state just after forcefully overthrowing the incumbent president. This rulership of Buhari as head of state eventually lasted between 1983 and 1985, but it wasn't normal at all. Of course, from recent experience, we can obviously tell that it is not going to be normal. But I'm talking about a unique abnormality here. Unique and funny. I'm going to highlight some of the things you should know about this regime. Buhari came in as a proposed saint. He claimed that the former system was too corrupt, which wasn't a lie. So corrupt that he had no option than to stage a coup to remove the reckless and corrupt civilian rule, so he could restore the country back on track. And he meant it. Once he entered office, he retired a lot of people straight away. People working at the top level, all these permanent secretaries, senior police and naval officers. He set up new laws, and if you broke these laws, you are dealt with. Even the common civilians, he was literally aggressive and put everyone in order and decorum. In 20 months as head of state, about 500 politicians, officials and businessmen were jailed for corruption during his stewardship. Even Fela did not escape Buhari. It was during this time that he was famously arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. You could not own a protest or go on strike no matter how much salary they owe you. You could not have any public demonstration at all. Any person who published anything that did not speak well of the government in any form, whether written or otherwise, any person who gave any message, rumor, report or statement or any YouTube video at all, anything at all that spoke ill of the government was immediately taken down, and the initiator was going to basically suffer if found guilty. The punishment was kind of particular too. You may pay 10,000 naira or spend 2 years in prison. The second thing you should know about this regime is that Buhari loved discipline. I'm not trying to be funny or sarcastic here. This thing about Buhari calling Nigerian youths lazy isn't him goofing around. In 1984, he literally launched a policy called the War Against Indiscipline. The policy tried to address the perceived lack of public morality and civic responsibility in the Nigerian society. In summary, these are some of the details. You must form neat queues at bus stops. Of course, if you don't, you'll be dealt with the soldiers. If you are a civil servant and you fail to show up to work on time, you would be humiliated and forced to do frog jumps. You see, many minor offenses carried long sentences. Any student over the age of 17 caught cheating on an examination would get 21 years in prison. I didn't make it up. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. That was the law. Things changed and the laws were just tough. Many people were condemned, arrested and even paid that 10,000 naira. And it's not funny. It wasn't a joke then. But all of this was Buhari's philosophy and an attempt to end corruption and build a country that would thrive. But what about the economy?
Nigeria, pain and promise.
Record high inflation.
Continent's economic powerhouse.
The naira is falling.
The economic leader of sub-Saharan Africa.
For me, I believe it's the most important thing that any president, any leader should work on. Buhari made a lot of changes in an attempt to rescue the economic situation of the country, which had been previously shattered by the former administration. Many of the changes he made were harsh but worth it. Some were unwise, while some were just wicked. Buhari's economic strategy was so different that it got its own name. Well, it was actually named after Buhari. Buhari's economic ideology was actually named Buharism. I'm not aware of who came up with the name. Maybe it's Buhari. Okay, what was Buharism about? Well, for starters, he did it how Peter Obi would do it. Stinginess. He started removing or cutting back the excesses in national expenditure. Then he continued obliterating or completely removing corrupt processes and corrupt people. But then he went further. He significantly reduced importation. He placed a temporary ban on recruiting federal public sector workers so that the government would have to pay less salary. The interest rates were raised, capital projects were halted, state governments were prohibited from borrowing money. He did a lot of economic adjustments. Many will say he did too much. For instance, the import restrictions made it difficult for local industries to get the essential materials they usually import to produce things here. This led many of them to close or operate at a greatly reduced capacity. Many workers were laid off. The government itself sent off many workers to increase cost effectiveness. In that year alone, 200,000 civil servants were sent off. Like your father will just come on one day with a sack letter. Why? Because the government wants to pay less salaries. Cost effectiveness. Eventually, all of these Buhari-mistic actions were accompanied by high inflation. The price of basic food items rose. Life became increasingly difficult, even for rich people. Some things never change, and this was just a problem. Even though Buhari tackled corruption and laziness, the economy wasn't good. Buhari failed to deal with the country's economic problems with his Buharism, and soon people could not take it anymore, especially one man, Major General Ibrahim Babangida. He led in the 1985 Nigeria coup d'etat and overthrew Buhari. After being overthrown, he was under detention for 3 solid years. Buhari spent 3 years of detention in a small guarded bungalow in Benin. I could say they were trying to guard him both physically and spiritually, if you know what I mean. He had access to television that showed 2 channels, and members of his family were allowed to visit him, of course with the authorization of Babangida. Whatever went on, Buhari obviously resolved not to give up. He was definitely going to come back and take back this mandate which was stolen from him. Just like Peter Obi. In December 1988, after his mother's death, he was released and free at last. Notwithstanding, he went back into politics, but nothing too serious. Not up to 15 years later. By then he had gotten back on his feet and worked strong. 15 years later, it was 2003. Buhari decided it was time. He was going to be president. Oh, by that time the military regime had passed away and the country had transited well into democracy. We could not just set up a coup. Not that I'm trying to say we would have done that. What I am saying is that there was now a new system of rulership in place. You had to campaign for president. So, Buhari campaigned. He ran for office in the presidential election as the candidate of the ANPP. He was defeated by the PDP's incumbent, President Olusegun Obasanjo. Well, he was defeated by more than 11 million votes. By 2007, he tried again. This time around, he lost to the president that everyone seems to like, Yar'Adua, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. In March 2010, Buhari left the ANPP for the CPC, a party he had helped to found. By 2011, he contested again, but this time he had bad luck as he lost to Goodluck Jonathan. This particular election was very violent. Supporters of opposing parties were attacking each other, and it was terrible. It was so bad that 800 people were killed during the course of the election. Notwithstanding, Buhari was clearly pained and frustrated that he lost, despite putting in a lot of efforts. He claimed that the vote was flawed and he warned in quotes. I think I should quote him. He claimed that if what happened in 2011 should happen again in 2015, by the grace of God, the dog and the baboon would all be soaked in blood. Meaning it was either he was going to be president or there was going to be bloodshed. In Yoruba language, this is translated Emilokan, but it means, yeah, exactly. Later on, Buhari switched yet again to another party, the APC. Then we had the 2015 election. The election had a lot of controversies and difficult moments too, interesting moments also. You remember when it was trending on social media that Buhari did not have a secondary school certificate? Yeah, it was from this election as Jonathan supporters dug out these facts and demanded that Buhari be disqualified from the election, claiming that he was in breach of the constitution, which demanded that to qualify for election to the office of the president, a person must be educated up to at least secondary school certificate level or its equivalent. There was a lot of contention, but to cut the story short, Buhari finally emerged as winner. Of course, nobody was ready for the dog and baboon to be all soaked in blood. So 30 years after being overthrown by Babangida and after several attempts, Buhari was back. What was about to happen in the next 8 years is arguably the best written script for a lifetime of suffering and agony for many Nigerians.
In Daura, in present Katsina State, young Muhammadu.
Alright, it's 2015. Buhari is announced as president. Before anything, he has to choose members of his cabinet, people who would be at that top administrative level with him. Well, Buhari chose people who were already close to him. I don't know, maybe he had trust issues, but anyways, time went on, and we soon had our first problem, Buhari's health. It started as an ear infection, but soon it began to get worse. He was always having one health problem or the other, and was always leaving the country for one medical checkup or the other. Speculations about the president's health started arising. He was missing in action so many times, missing in very important public appearances. In 2017, he stayed away for 104 days for treatment abroad. Nigerians started getting concerned, especially when Buhari even stated that he wanted to be working from home. It was so bad that the vice president had to represent him so many times. It was clear that this man wasn't well. Many people thought he had died. Many hoped he had died. Some even believed he was already dead and replaced with a clone. It was weird. Even to today, some people still believe that the original person had died, and who we have been seeing since is actually a clone from somewhere. It's a very creepy stuff, but very sad. Regardless, this is a very rough way to kick off your tenure, and it was going to affect everything inevitably. Let's talk about the economy. Buhari's second chance to fix the economy. How was the economy under his tenure? Terrible. You see, Buhari was not very particular about the economy, unlike his first regime. I don't know why. When it took him 6 months to initiate his domestic policy agenda, like naming of cabinet officials, the actual drafting and passage of the 2016 and 2017 budgets were delayed by infighting, probably because of his health. This meant that first of all, there was no Buharism in this tenure. It was worse. In Buhari's first year of office, Nigeria suffered a decline in commodity prices, which triggered an economic recession. To source funds and tackle this mess that was building up, what did Buhari do? Of course, I'll tell you. Buhari traveled to 20 countries seeking loans. Remember that this was the same person that banned borrowing in his military regime. In the first year of his administration, the Naira, the currency of Nigeria, depreciated in the black market so badly. In May 2016, the government announced a rise in the official pump price of petroleum to curtail the shortfall in the commodity as a result of foreign exchange shortages. In 2016, the country's economy declined by 1.6%, and in 2017, even till this day, per capita economic growth is projected to be negligible. What all this grammar simply means is that the kind of sapa and shege that was coming was the kind that we had never seen before. That's what they call sha. Partially because with the way the country is headed, I think there is more to come. I think we have not even seen anything. Buhari's first tenure as head of state coincided with a decline in oil prices, similar to his second tenure. Even till now that he's vacating the office, his administration never showed a dedicated effort to diversify the source of national income. Even since 2016, when this economic downturn started, we are not recovering. Unemployment levels remain high, and any efforts to increase non-oil revenues has not improved, while the government is still pumping so much money into paying back the debt that was borrowed during Buhari's tenure. Yeah, I made a video diving into debt. It's a very wide story, and you should check it out after this video. In short, once again, Buhari failed woefully to rescue the economy. The economy just got worse. But just as you already know, this was nothing compared to what was coming, or rather what has come. In the midst of this chaos, if there's anything Buhari could take pride in, it was that he was a force that destroyed corruption. I mean, his main campaigning point while contesting was that he was going to end corruption just like he effectively did as a military leader. I know you don't agree with this one, and you can swear that Buhari is one of the most corrupt people in this country. I know, but you see, it was different. Slightly. Fighting corruption was actually one of the few places Buhari did fine during his first tenure. Very significant investigations were made during his tenure, and many corrupt practices were exposed, like an investigation into the money that was released under Jonathan's tenure to help the armed forces fight Boko Haram. They made an investigation, and this investigative report indicated that a total sum of $2.2 billion was inexplicably disbursed into the office of the National Security Advisor for the sole purpose of the procurement of arms to fight against the Boko Haram insurgency. But this money was not spent for the purpose for which the money was being disbursed. Everybody involved in embezzling that money was arrested. I'm talking about ministers, security advisors, a governor, the chief of army staff, the chief of air staff. They were all prosecuted, at least to a level that you would not expect today. In May 2018, the EFCC, Nigerian Anti-Corruption Agency, and a typical Yahoo boy nightmare, announced that 603 Nigerian prominent figures had been convicted of corruption charges since Buhari took office in 2015. The EFCC also announced that for the first time in Nigeria's history, judges, top military officers, including retired service chiefs, were being prosecuted for corruption. So yes, he wasn't a saint, but you were not just going to steal money under him or indulge in corruption under him. Then, except he was part of it too. You see, Nigerians did not have to battle with corrupt leaders, a failed economy, or never. There was one very, very dangerous problem the country had been facing for years: insecurity. The insecurity was just so much, and it was a case of national emergency. If Buhari could fail in every other area, if he could not directly improve the economy, even if he was deemed a failure, he just had to arrest the situation of insecurity. I mean, as a one-time military leader, you should have the experience necessary to confront and overcome conflict. But he didn't. I think it was too much for him. These were the list of insecurity issues. We had the Niger Delta militants attacking the oil facilities. We had the Shia Muslims with their Islamic agenda. We have the Biafra separatists who just wanted to leave the country by force. The Boko Haram were just the best at bombing and kidnapping. We then had the Fulani herdsmen who were at war with farmers, predominantly Christians. And also we had the several bandit groups in the north. If there was anything that would seal Buhari's tenure as terrible and ineffective, it was these security issues. For someone that wasn't healthy and consistent to start with, this was a recipe for disaster. And so, it played out badly. Towards the end of his first tenure in 2018, there was gross dissatisfaction, especially as there had been a recession and life was difficult. I remember then, I believed so much that there was no way we were going to re-elect this man after the previous suffering we had witnessed. I believed that he was not going to be re-elected, that it wasn't possible. Atiku was also running for presidency at that time alongside Peter Obi as vice president. The presidential 2019 election was around the corner. As usual, politicians began to feed us their promises. Everyone was promising Nigerians a better tomorrow, and Buhari wasn't exempted. I remember very well. He called it change. He promised to give us change. February, the election kicked off. Just like what we witnessed recently, it wasn't a free and fair election. Normally, I don't believe this country can hold a free and fair election. On the 27th of February 2019, the election results were announced and Buhari was declared winner. Immediately following the elections, there were claims of widespread fraud by the opposition. The claims included accusation of ballot box snatching, vote trading and impersonation. The losing candidate, Atiku Abubakar, filed a case in the Nigerian Supreme Court citing widespread irregularities in the polls, just like what we are seeing today. However, the court dismissed his case, saying that Atiku had failed to provide sufficient evidence for a widespread fraud committed by the electoral team of Buhari. The court also dismissed the allegation that said that Buhari had lied about his academic background. Buhari's second tenure was something different. It bettered something different, as you know, both bad and good. I can't possibly cover it all in this video. I'm going to make this video into a two-part series so that I can really focus and dive well into the story for us to understand. There are many things Nigerians still do not know about how corrupt this nation eventually turned out to be under Buhari. It is very scary and dangerously corrupt. There are many things we don't know about how power has been used in very evil and diabolic ways. How we are being controlled, what went on during the COVID-19 pandemic, what really happened during NSAS. It's very sad and very frightening to think about these things or make a video about these kinds of topic. I may not. It depends on how well this video does and your reaction to it. Regardless, this is the story I wanted to share. I hope you found this valuable and I hope to see you soon.